I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if it please you, join me here for a bit of palaver on the 117th episode of Hey-O to Stephen King. That's right, the show that I do twice every week here on the horror show, every terrifying, terrible Tuesday, every spooktacular, scarific Saturday. You can just call me Fuego for short, and I wholeheartedly, sincerely, and humbly welcome you to the horror show. And this is going to be a very special and, in a lot of ways, long requested episode of Hail to Stephen King. I originally had an episode in place that was going to be discussing right there at the very top of that terrifying tower of books, because Sai King is, in fact, my favorite author of all time, talking about the Ghostland brothers. But that is going to wait for another day, because it's been a very interesting week of creative soul searching and stuff like that, because I'm about to relaunch my personal YouTube channel in Fuegotainment, which all of you can find here on YouTube, just youtube.com/Jaime and Fuego, just like you see my alter ego, my equivalent of Richard Bachman, I guess. But it's really just a moniker that has taken on a life of its own over the last decade since I shifted from print journalism into jumping in front of a camera, whether originally as a VJ with Heavy Metal Television, jumping into work on the horror show here, which I am so honored to be a part of. But so with all of that being said, I had a question back when I was still frequently doing just video ideas for this show based on people who tune in regularly or occasionally or whatever. And this was actually a question that came a long time ago. I'm not sure if this viewer still watches in waiting and just, doesn't really comment very often, but it's from a YouTuber by the name of Dragon Cats. And so this is where I just want to emphasize that as I go further along into, newer installments of this program, I really want more fan input as to what you guys would like to see me cover as far as a question, a topic, things like that. Because, I have production notes, through a good chunk of next year, ideas for shows, and, news comes out, anniversaries of, books and films and miniseries and things like that. There will still be new ideas generated, concurrently and constantly. But I want more just thoughts and, just suggestions from all of you. And so if you have any ideas, say them in the comments below, or jump onto the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group, which I am the sole moderator and admin of, and just, let me know what you think I should be, spending some time covering and stuff. So what Dragon Cats asked many, many moons ago here on this level of the tower, Keystone Earth, I guess is what we would call it, but asked me if I have ever been inspired by Stephen King to either write or to create art in general. And so as I'm staring down, as a creative person, or at least one that likes to think that I am, I play music in a band called Chiron. I play drums and, sing and help out with lyrics and stuff. I've been a poet and a writer since I was a very, very young guy. And, hundreds and hundreds of poems and, song lyrics and things like that written over the years. And that's actually something you're going to see kind of popping up here and there on my personal YouTube channel. I'm going to actually, put some of that stuff out there for the world to see. I'm nervous, I'm excited, and that's actually something that King has discussed from time to time, and that I think really holds true with art, especially with the art of storytelling, is the fact that you are essentially laying yourself bare, and you are most definitely opening yourself up for not just scrutiny or, praise, but, obviously criticism and detractors and stuff. And I think King really got a bad rap early on in his career for the sheer fact that everyone was like, oh, you're a schlock, writer, you're a hack artist, all this other stuff. You're writing this pulpy horror fluff that's not really very deep. And I feel like that stigma was massively unwarranted and certainly unfair. And I think like a lot of more like mainstream and non-horror critics and stuff, beyond the CRs, all of us across the world, the rest of the world really started to to move on, you know, to use a, the world moved on, to use a King phrase that's also very popular from the Tower series. But they moved on from those preconceptions, and obviously things like Stand By Me and Misery and Shawshank and The Green Mile, and even perhaps to a lesser degree Hearts in Atlantis, and even the Dark Tower series in general, and the fact that it was a melding of so many different things. There's a little horror in there, but it's really a fantasy Western, there's sci-fi elements, there's, you know, there is some horror, obviously, but there's drama, there's, you know, full-on action with, you know, mobsters, there's stuff taking place in another world, there's stuff taking place in our world, or something close to it, and so the rest of the world they moved on from those opinions and from just those prejudices, I guess you could say. And so as a creator, though, you really have to leave yourself bare and open for that sort of just reaction, I guess. And so that's some of the stuff that I've been thinking about as I'm getting ready to, you know, relaunch things and whatnot. But yeah, Stephen King most definitely has. I'm going to go one step further. I'm not just going to talk about how he has inspired me to either write or create or whatever, but I'm going to take it even deeper and say how he has inspired me personally, you know, just to kind of be a better person and stuff like that. And so obviously it all started before I'd ever read Stephen King, because probably like many, you know, kids that grew up in the 80s and 90s, as I did, we were exposed to TV adaptations or, you know, films on you know, cable reruns or syndication or whatever. And so things being shown that, you know, we didn't necessarily have parentals or family members or siblings or friends or whatever jamming down our throats, you know, it was stuff that we actually, you know, discovered on our own. And so at a very young age, I saw a little bit of Stephen King's It, you know, I got that Pennywise action, and that scared the crap out of me, most notably the drain sequence with Bevy. But, you know, little Georgie talking in the sewers to adult Bill, stuff like that was what really kind of messed me up. But what really, you know, put its stranglehold on me was when I was over at my Yaya and Papa's house, and oh boy, I was like 10 or 11-ish, you know, maybe a little younger, I can't recall per se, but yeah, I saw the Stand miniseries on television, and I think that was what really sowed the seeds for the fact that you could have scares, but with really deep personal development of characters, a large cast. The religious intertwinement was big for me, being raised Reformed Baptist and everything. And so, obviously, a love for horror was fostered long before I ever read anything Stephen King. And I already had kind of an interest in horror from watching the Twilight Zone marathons, and I was getting a little bit into the R.L. Steins and, you know, Christopher Pikes later on and things like that. But yeah, it was definitely seeing some of that, seeing something like The Stand that really inspired me when I started trying to write stories when I was in junior high. And one in particular that I recall, I wish I still had it lying around somewhere, but it was lost in all the shuffles of, you know, aging and, you know, stacks of, you know, papers and reports and things like that. But I was in junior high in the, like, right around the turn of the millennium. And I think it was 8th grade, if I'm not mistaken, but I wrote this short story, and it was about a series of murders that are transpiring in this small town, and nobody knows who, you know, who the perpetrator is, and they're trying so very hard to figure it out. And I was trying to craft these characters, and there was a church pastor involved, and lo and behold, the big twist was the fact that this church pastor was essentially sleepwalking and murdering in his sleep. That was the big twist. And the funny thing is, this was long before the Christopher Nolan film Insomnia came out. It's so funny how, not to be confused with the Ralph Roberts tale, obviously, but it's funny how they say that these ideas are floating around in the subconscious, and that's why so much technological advancement can transpire in completely despondent, separate, uninteracting areas of the world at about the same time over the course of civilization and history. And so there is that big theory about, you know, once it's in the public consciousness, that's where it can just arise anywhere without any sort of, you know, people coming into contact with one another to share these ideas, these thoughts and stuff like that. I mean, hell, I wrote a song called In the End years before that hybrid theory Linkin Park crap came out. But so nonetheless, King, and to a lesser degree, you know, the aforementioned names like, you know, Pike and Stein and stuff that I mentioned, but also the sci-fi I was probably reading at the time too, and, you know, like, oh boy, you know, Timeline and, you know, boy, wasn't reading Matheson at the time, wasn't reading, you know, Bloch, or Bloch, reading Heinlein and Asimov and stuff like that. But so long story short, King was definitely, and his storytelling that I saw on screen, because I also watched about that time stuff like Storm of the Century, and it was like in the Shining miniseries. It was like anytime a Stevie King miniseries came on, and I wasn't reading King yet, just to reiterate that, I found it inspiring, and it was an event, and it really did get the juices flowing a little bit to just write and want to craft storytelling. And it's funny because in the last almost 2 years now since I started this program, I've been revisiting a lot of story ideas that I had when I first started reading Stephen King. And it was when I first started reading Stephen King about 8 years ago now, when I was like, okay, I want to read Pet Sematary. I want to read The Stand. I want to read it. And it was shortly thereafter when I realized that Rainbow Flag popped up in the Dark Tower series and, Eyes of the Dragon and a few other books. I was like, okay, I got to start at the very beginning with Carrie, and I got to go through the entire journey along the path of the beam, and even read, the stuff that doesn't necessarily tie in with the tower, but just everything in its published order, so that I get all of those connections, whether it's just, smaller connections like Dolores Claiborne and Gerald's Game, or whether it's bigger stuff like the Castle Rock intertwinement, or even something like Cujo being mentioned in Pet Sematary. I wanted the full experience, I guess you could say. And so it was about that time that I started coming up with a bunch of different short story ideas of my own, and I've started revisiting them, here in, I'd say, the last 6 to 8, 9 months or something like that. And also people like Jim Hahn, for instance, on the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group, who is a writer himself and does screenplays and stories and things like that. Just hearing other writers talk about how King has influenced them has obviously aided in the trickle-down factor, and energy is contagious in my opinion, as enthusiasm is, Also negative energy is contagious as well, which, oh boy, we probably saw in the most recent political season, unfortunately. But the point that I'm really trying to drive home here is that I came up with a bunch of ideas, and I have been revisiting them in the last few months, and just I'm in the process now, which is pretty exciting, of trying to put together an anthology series, which is, King's always said, you write what you know, and it's an anthology series of shorts, and maybe there's a novella in there. I'm not sure how far I want to flesh it out, but I don't want to divulge the title, because it's such a dangerous move to say, hey, this is this story and this is my idea for it, but I'll just be vague enough and say I have a collection of about 6 or 7 stories right now that I'm in the process of giving some development to, and one of the big New Year's goals for the year of 2019, it's going to be a big one for both King and hopefully for myself, and hopefully for all of you who King has inspired to create, or however he's inspired you in your life. But yeah, they're all kind of, I live in the Arizona desert, so it's the Deadly Desert, as I call it. That's my Return to Oz reference for the day. But yeah, the juices are flowing again. They most definitely are, and it's a desert-themed anthology, and I'm working with a friend right now for some really cool cover artwork that I originally wanted to be a cover for my band. It might be a little too gruesome though, but I think it would be, and it'll probably get this book banned unless I self-release. I don't know, who the hell knows. But so the bottom line here being, yes, King has most definitely inspired me in a writing format to want to create, to want to cultivate. And, I probably wouldn't be in a horror metal band that wants to have like this big threading concept about fighting monsters and, a long history of an organization that for thousands of years has stood between the otherworldly nemesis and, just the world of man that, just couldn't even bear with the curtain being pulled away. And that's like the whole vibe of my band, and that's a concept that I came up with. And so yeah, a love of horror was definitely where things initially started with me and King. But this is where I really want to take things at least a little bit deeper, because of the fact that things really changed very profoundly once I started reading Stephen King. And one thing that, with the exception of some of the Bachman stuff, obviously, and maybe a story like Pet Sematary, maybe revival to some degree, but to really just spell it out, King inspired me personally with just his own outlook on the world, and even more so, just the demons he's had to face, I guess you could say. That's been a major source of inspiration. And so King, very similar to me, was raised religious. I can't remember if he was Pentecostal or if he was Methodist or what the deal was, at least offhand, because this is a very off-the-cuff video. Like I said, I had a different video in place for today, but that's going to be an episode later on before the end of the year. So you have a moral fabric and fiber, I think, that is ingrained into you if you are raised, I'm not even going to say Christian, I'm going to say just there are specific moral precepts, I think, that I took a world religions class back in college when I was studying audio production technology as one of my electives, and I do feel in a lot of ways like there is a set of moral precepts that are pretty transcendental at the end of the day. And it really boils down to not inflicting needless harm on other people, not lying and cheating, not being a sexually perverse whore of a person, things like that, not being excessively and needlessly vulgar. These are just really just, they're the most simple of ways to approach interacting with other people in society. And so, I mean, for that reason, I'm very glad at the way that I was raised, because of the fact that even though I'm not a Christian or a religious person or anything like that, I do consider myself a spiritual person, and I would honestly consider King very much the same, especially with the amount of spirituality and indeed, just Western, I don't want to use a term like biblical, but I mean, a lot of the faith-based stuff that he injects, and you can tell the man was raised religious. And so for that reason, there's two sides to the coin, okay? So as Christians, there's that belief that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God and that people are inherently evil. And I think that is something King definitely explores, is the evil side of man and the corruption and just the fight against the flesh, the eternal struggle to do the right thing. But there's those that they either weren't raised right, or they have a predisposition towards evil or something like that, or they have experiences, where they are wronged and they are in turn, fashioned that way based on the negativity, the contagiousness of energy that I talked about earlier. And so that's something that King most definitely explores, whether it's, ultimate evil like something in Dairy, or whether it's a very simplistic evil like Annie Wilkes in Misery, or whatever it may be, a killer like you have, or a sinister son of a bitch like in Rose Matter, there's some with no real supernatural implications of any kind. So even if you take out the otherworldly nature, King has explored that inherent evil within man, without anything supernatural going down. And so he has, I think, based on the way he was brought up and that sort of instruction through religion, that idea that man probably to a lot of degrees is not that there's a dark side, there's a dark half, if we want to make another reference of sorts. But if I'm going to go to the other side of the coin, and I think that especially as I went from agnostic to atheist, but shifting back to agnosticism, where I'm a firm believer that I don't think all of this happened by accident. I don't think the intricacies of, the inner workings of the human body, all of these different things like that, the majesty of, of this planet and this universe and everything. I'm not denouncing evolution or science or anything of that nature, but is it really that unforeseeable that some sort of, power beyond us could have been the spark that was the bang that, started everything in motion? I'm not trying to give anybody a scientific or a religious lecture here. I'm just basically speaking my thoughts and how reading Sai King has made me think about these things. Talk about the palaver between Flag and Roland in the first Dark Tower book, The Gunslinger, and, just that is psychedelic craziness that goes down near the end of that book and really will get the gears turning in your head thinking about that kind of stuff. And so the other side of the coin here for me really is the fact that despite the cognizance of the evil within man, King is very fond and deliberate with his silver lining. And that is the other side of the spectrum for me. And something that King has reminded me and taught me is that there is good within people. We can't write everybody off. You can't assume the worst about every person, you know? I'm not an optimist and I'm not a pessimist. I consider myself a realist. I hope for the best, but I plan for the worst. But you have to hope for the best. You have to look for the good in people. Sometimes it's a lost cause, you know? I mean, if you're someone like Jeffrey Dahmer, that's a lost Fergan cause, man. But I do think that there is enough gray area, especially in certain people, where it could go one of two ways based on the energy that you pass along to them, that positivity that you need to put out into the universe, you know? And the arc of a character like Roland, where he's so self-centered initially, and yet he grows and has an arc where he becomes more caring and more compassionate and all of these things. And so the silver lining is the fact that I do believe that, you know, based on King's upbringing and, you know, even Jesus was a real person, you know, he's in Roman records, you know, whether he was, you know, this son of God or whatever. Nonetheless, he was somebody who had some pretty solid ideas, you know, and, you know, for that reason, I do believe that you have to look for the good, and you do have to look for that silver lining that King all too often puts, especially in his lengthier stuff, you know. With the short stories and with the Bachman stuff, yeah, it's more the twist Twilight Zone, Tales from the Crypt, whatever, EC Comics type vibe, you know, where things turn out horribly. But there is the flip side, you know, as I mentioned. And so you do have to seek out the good, and you have to seek out those things that are enriching, and you have to just find that silver lining and really strive for the light and not accept the bad things and not focus on the bad things in your life. Yes, life is a mixed bag, you know, and that's why even in most of King's stories where there is a silver lining and there is hope at the end, it's after facing some serious adversity, like, you know, daunting stuff, you know. But there was a song that I wrote many years ago for my solo record that I'm trying to work on again as well, and it's a song called Waiting for the Light to Appear. And there's a line in the third verse where I say, "Those who oppose are powerful, but no obstacle is insurmountable." And just for that reason, I mean, you can wait around forever for revelation. You have to be a part of the process, obviously, but you can't be too skeptical and cynical and all of this stuff. You have to open your heart to the good things and the positive things in this world. And I honestly think that is the flip side of like some older teachings, you know, especially in the Bible, you know, spare the rod, spoil the child, stone the this and that and whatever, versus the New Testament, you know, vibe of acceptance and things like that. Once again, I'm not a Christian. I was just raised that way, and I do feel better for the fact that some of that instruction, and I feel like King is a better and more interesting writer for that sheer fact. And so that's where it really boils down to the fact that you have to understand and accept the evil within man, but you also have to be hopeful that, you know, things can turn out right, because those who don't think things are going to turn out right, you're basically like a Stillman or whatever, you know, who wants to just press the button and destroy the world, you know, because you're, well, first and foremost, you're an asshole, but secondly, because you don't think that there is hope for diplomacy and for people being able to meet one another in the middle and be accepting of one another and understanding. And, you know, King is very big on acceptance of diversity, as he really hammered you in the face with in Elevation, his most recent book. And, you know, even if it was a little heavy-handed, I do think that the message was pure and meant well. And that is lastly the third and final thing that I want to make mention of how King has inspired me and enriched my life. And that's the way that his work is able to bring people together. King's work is able to bring people together. I have people on the Hail to Stephen King Facebook from all over the world. And it is, I use a term like humbling, like it's going out of style, but that's the best word that I can think of, because of the fact that, you know, we have so many people from all over the place interacting with one another, whether, you know, we're using Google translators or whatever for a lot of what we're saying and posting, whether, you know, you're in Sweden or Italy or Brazil or Mexico or, you know, United States or Canada or the UK. Shout out to my UK homies like, you know, Jacob and, you know, Trauma Trash Mikey and stuff. But it's it's really just, it's so inspiring to me the way that somebody with the type of message that I feel is a threading theme and just constantly on display with El Rey, with Sai King. I feel like when a message is genuine and pure a lot of the time, it can break through and be just as connective as a message of hate, you know, whether it's political figures, you know, now or in the past, you know. A message of hate, I feel like, can be not just equaled but toppled by just a message of harmony and a message of the fact that, yeah, you know, things may seem dire, but, you know, there is that light at the end of the tunnel. Who knows, it may be like Metallica says, and I'm not a Metallica fan, but the best lyrics that Hetfield ever wrote was, you know, I hope it's not a freight train coming my way, but it's not always, you know? And even if it is, I mean, hell, who knows, there may be hope to just squeeze on the side or, you know, hide under the tracks or whatever the hell. I mean, you can't give up hope. You gotta fight till the end, as cliched as that may sound. And so that's really the third point that I wanted to hammer home here in the way that King has inspired me. King has inspired me in the way that, you know, a message like his that shows up all too often in his work, it brings people together. His creativity and just the positivity that I feel like, you know, he eventually and inevitably brings to so much of what he has written is what brings so many of us together. And I cannot express, again, enough appreciation for everybody who I've met just from reading Stephen King and getting involved with, you know, just discussion and debate and all of these great things that I've had, you know, sitting in bookstores with people, seeing somebody, you know, just at the hotel that I work at who, you know, has, they're just like, oh, they got a Stephen King book with them, and we strike up a conversation. It is really a cool, constant reader. It's beyond a fan club. It's beyond, you know, a subsect of a subsect, as I always joke, you know, about with, you know, with my religious upbringings and stuff like that. But it's something bigger than that. It's of ginormous equivalent of the Tower and all of the King verse, intertwining alternate realities and everything in and of itself. It's big time, and it's something that has enriched my life massively. Reading Stephen King has inspired me, and with everybody that I've met and interacted with, whether in person or through any sort of the interwebs, you know, social media is definitely a tough juggling act of not getting too sucked into it, but in the same right, just it can connect us, you know, in positive ways. And so for that reason, my life has been genuinely just better from reading Stephen King, and he continues to inspire me on the daily, pretty much, you know. And so I guess that does about sum up this video. Thanks again to Dragon Cats, if this video was ever seen by that particular YouTuber. And just to reiterate what I mentioned earlier, I want show suggestions and ideas from all of you. I can continue, you know, this Blaine, this you know, Charlie the Choo Choo forward without any assistance, but I think it'll be a much merrier and more interesting ride if I get more input from all of you. So yes, I got to say thank ya very, very much. I do hope that we have been well met. I have been Jaime and Fuego. You can find me on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Like I said, 11/11, which is Sunday tomorrow, there is going to be a first episode of, a first new bit of content, I should say, on Infuegotainment for the first time in a while. It's going to be the Geek End Rewind, and it's going to be me talking about the bueno, the malo, and the feo, the good, the bad, and the ugly of just the hottest entertainment with an edge stories that have hit this past week. And yeah, there's going to be all kinds of new content coming, so stay tuned to that. You can find me on all social media sectors, as I said, just like you see it below. I mean Fuego. But more importantly, because you're watching the horror show, you need to subscribe, you need to hit that bell so that you get notifications about all of the different things that we do here. We consider ourselves the most prolific YouTube channel on the interwebs, on the YouTubies, and that's not to take anything away from any of our contemporaries who we love and respect so very much, whether it's Lee from Drum Dums, whether it's Cody Leach, whether it's Jason Smith from Sinister Cinema, whether it's you know, Brian Gatta from Horror Show Entertainment, whoever it may be. And I know there's a lot that I'm not messing mentioning there, but you know, we do 2 to 3 episodes a day, and everything from trailer reactions to film reviews. We just put up our Overlord review. I had a conflict, so I didn't get to see it with Cecil and Dirk, and I plan on it, so you'll probably see my thoughts on that popping up sometime in the near future. But, so that is one of the newest pieces of content we put up, but we also do video game Let's Plays, we do unboxings, we do tons of cool convention coverage, interviewing celebrities and different awesome creative types, whether they're artists or, you know, whatever it may be. So if you want all of the little dingers, you know, anytime we put up new content, you definitely got to hit that bell, and obviously make sure that you have subscribed, like, share this video with the hashtag Hail to Stephen King. It is supremely appreciated. And also, if you want to check out my band Chiron's music, horror, metal, concept craziness, yep, you can go to facebook.com/ChironBandAZ or Reverb Nation at reverbnation.com/ChironBandAZ. We are about to be competing in a local radio station thing called Pladio on 98 KUPD here in the Phoenix metro area. Our 2nd year in a row being a part of that, so we're pretty stoked. And on November 17th, if anyone is in the Arizona area, we have our next show at Joe's Grotto, which is pretty exciting. But enough of that stuff about me. This show is about the man I so affectionately call El Rey. So I will finish things off by saying, hasta luego, sin amigos, constant readers and viewers across this planet Earth. I hope that we get to connect with one another sooner rather than later. And until that instance occurs, remember y'all, stay scared and read Stephen King, because if I'm not mistaken, he is guaranteed to inspire.